Wow. So welcome back. And I am so excited because this time I have a guest, and I have a guest that I'm really excited to talk to. I'd like to introduce you to Owen Marcus. Owen Marcus is a coach, and I believe we can find you on owenmarcus.com. But I am so excited about Owen because he's a coach that works with men. And I think that in talking about therapy and talking about working with people, oftentimes men can be left behind for a lot of different reasons. And Owen, as he's going to talk to us about, is not a therapist, but his work is so exciting and so groundbreaking, I feel, because it's opening men up to an aspect of talking about their emotions and connections and all of these things that maybe traditional therapies haven't really been as useful. So, welcome, Owen. So nice to have you here. Would you like to give a brief bio of kind of your background and how you've come to this incredible work?
Um, yeah, basically, I came to it because I needed it. My undergraduate degree was in psych. I looked at being uh, a therapist, went another route, got into Rolfing, had been a Rolfer for 45 years, but also had done a lot of other things and ended up in Boulder back in the late 70s and ended up, just by the fluke of things, training with people like Ron Kurtz, Peter Levine, and really got immersed in the somatic psychotherapy approach when it was really on the fringe. And it just planted a seed that it germinated as I had my integrated medical clinic and did my Rolfing practice in Scottsdale for about 20 years. But right before I left Scottsdale and ended up eventually moving to North Idaho, I started to get into men's groups because I realized, I worked on a lot of things, done therapy, done all these trainings, but I still just wasn't succeeding in the way I wanted to in relationships. And I thought maybe working with men would help me. And I resisted that. So I thought, oh, there's probably something there. So I went and started my first men's group back in 1995. It was all right, but it was enough where it got me intrigued. And to shorten the story, 19 years ago, I said, well, I've done this traditional men's work and I saw some benefit, but I think there's something more that I and men are missing. And using my background in all that I've learned in mindfulness, the somatic psychotherapies, the Rolfing, the physiology of stress and trauma, all that, I crafted a new model for first men's groups. It really ended up being men's work, and applied it in this group in Sandpoint, the Sandpoint men's group. And asked 11 guys, they all said yes. Now, 19 years later, we've had over 400 men through this group, now several groups in this town of 8,000. And that was the foundation for the business that I developed, which became Everyman and is now evolving to something else. And what we've done is we've just been able to really connect men to their own physiology, their own body. And what I saw in my clinic was, you ask most guys, and I'm certainly one of them, what did you feel emotionally? And I would, either roll my eyes or try to leave the room because either I couldn't answer it or didn't want to answer it because I was too scared to answer it. But inevitably, when we ask a man, what do you feel in your body? They might not immediately have an answer, but they won't leave the room. They'll work with you. And then through that sort of door of what's happening in your body, we get to what's happening with your emotions. And by then, after that rapport is built, one, they can talk about it. I mean, they're aware of their emotions. And two, they feel safe enough to start to speak about their emotions. And that's sort of the essence of what, I started working on 19 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. And you talked about it a bit, but just for those out there that maybe aren't familiar, can you talk about this somatic approach a little bit?
Yeah. So my first teacher was Ron Kurtz. He developed what became the Hakomi method. And he was a student of what originally started with Reich, then became Lowen, Paracas, and it was using the body as a vehicle to create emotional change. And these guys were brilliant, but their approaches in some ways was a little crude. Now, Ron was a genius. He was finishing his Ph.D. at Columbia in therapy, and just said, what I'm learning is just not doing it for me, and went off and sort of did his own thing, which eventually became a Comey therapy. And I was fortunate to be in his first professional training, and we
Mm,
became good friends. And I even brought him into IBM. And what Ron would do is, using, you might say, somatic mindfulness, he would, you would stand up and he would just come up to you in his gentle, accepting voice, ask a few questions, make a few statements, and he just blew me away. Someone would stand up and volunteer. He'd just say a few things, maybe whisper a few things to the person. In a minute, they were sobbing.
mm,
And sometimes it was, these big tough guys, but he knew how to use the body to get connected to the emotions. And I was just absolutely blown away with it. I couldn't understand it. I could never do it. Uh, but it planted a seed where I was doing it. And what I found is we could train men pretty easily and pretty quickly in the basics of that, how to be connected to their own experience, number one, but to use my term, or from our vernacular, of taking a man deeper into his own experience, through the body, through their somatic awareness, taking them deeper into their own somatic and emotional experience. And so
mm.
that's what we train men to do. And we train therapists to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when I heard about this, every man and what you're doing, um, it made me think about the misunderstandings around, we can say therapy, but just the idea of men talking about their emotions and the misunderstandings around their ability to do that, the misconceptions. And I know I've looked on your website and we've talked about this, that men are taught to be strong, rational, practical beings, and not to say they aren't and they can't be, but it leaves, I know it's a little bit of a joke with my husband and I talk about my emotions and he tries to solve the problem. And
Yeah.
so, and you get frustrated because you want somebody to just hear your emotion. You want to hear,
Mhm.
you want them to hear what you're talking about. And so, can you talk a little bit about how you feel men are sort of, can kind of live in that idea that that they can't get in touch with their emotions, and what that then makes them feel about, being in a relationship, or anywhere relationship and anywhere emotions are needed.
Mhm.
This misconception that men shouldn't or can't connect with their emotions.
Yeah, I think it's essentially, there's a lot of things happening or trying to happen at the same time. And you named a big one, is that um, as men, we've been trained in different ways to perform, to fix, to solve problems, and we're good at it. We can talk about how we were the hunters and we stalked things out, and you know the genetics or the lineage of that. And we can talk about how society wants us to do that, and how we're reinforced and paid to do it, and how men get credibility from being able to perform well. All
Mhm.
that. So we're indoctrinated at a very early age to do that and to be that. And then, on our own, we want to connect. We learn that from all the studies around attachment theory. We need connection. So that's innate in us, even though we've been trained to be somewhat independent, or maybe more than somewhat, more self-reliant. But still, we have this natural urge. And then with our partners, we're being told, yeah, I need to feel you. And that's really what got me into this work. My girlfriend was saying, I need to feel you, Owen. And what you're telling me, I don't feel. And I
Mhm.
argued with her, not in an angry way, but like debated. And finally, I understood what she was saying. But just because I understood it didn't mean I knew how to do it. And that was what launched my whole men's movement, or my involvement in the men's movement. And so we have this need, and then we have this request from all, particularly the people in our lives, certainly the women in our lives, that they want to feel us, they want this emotional connection. And we know that they deserve it. And then the other thing that we're dealing with, and this is where, if I don't mean it in any politically incorrect way, but we are trained to be emotional, to feel our emotions, particularly communicate our emotions more in a feminine way. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just that, I think what happened 10,000 years ago when we left the tribe for the farm, men were not involved in raising the kids like they were for thousands of years before. And particularly 200 years ago when we left the farm for the factory, men were even further gone because they had to go to work. They had to leave. And women stepped up and filled the gap. So that's a good thing. And their teachers were women. So over a couple hundred years, the whole emotional zeitgeist has sort of shifted to a more feminine perspective. And which is what would naturally or needed to happen. And so here we are as men going, all right, I think I want to, I feel I want to, I'm being told I should be emotional. I'm trying to be emotional like my mother taught me, my teachers taught me, maybe my therapist, my girlfriends, all these women are teaching me to be emotional. And I'm speaking simplistically in a general sense. For us guys, what happens is we're just not getting it right. And my metaphor is that, Bonnie, if you're my partner and you find this beautiful material and you make this beautiful dress for me and you give me this dress to wear and I feel the love and I see the beautifulness and the exquisiteness of the material, but I go, look, I'm not a woman. I don't wear a dress. I just feel uncomfortable in this dress. It just doesn't fit me. And that's sort of how men feel, I think, sometimes about how they're expected to be emotional. And when it comes right down to it, we're way more alike than we're not alike. But there's some differences, and those differences particularly show up in relationship to being in relationship with like a female partner.
Mm.
And so what I've seen is that when men try to do it, and I got really good at doing it the way that women wanted it. I mean, I literally studied the books on it decades ago, and it worked. Women said, "Oh, you're really safe, you're really nice, and all this," but my relationships would just fizzle away. And I go, "I'm doing everything right. Why is it not working?" And then it dawned on me it's not working because I'm not doing it in a way that's innate for me or maybe for men, and I'm not really being emotional. I'm still performing in some way. It's not
Mm.
fully authentic. Even though I'm trying, and women knew I was trying, but it just wasn't doing it for them, and it wasn't doing it for me. And what I saw with myself and hundreds and really now thousands of men is when they find in their own way their own emotional connection and their own emotional language by working with other men and practicing with other men, it just starts to naturally embody in them because it is natural. And it just generalizes into their other relationships without much work. And women start to get that polarity that they maybe had when they first started dating this guy, and they feel this attraction. So he's being more masculine at the same time he's being more vulnerable, which is what that man's always wanted.
Mm. Yeah. I loved something you had on your site too, because it really aligns with a lot of the work that I do with trying to help people understand that we aren't innately flawed. That what has happened to us has taught us things, and in therapy, it's trauma and types of things that burrow in there, and the self-talk becomes quite negative, and the self-worth, self-esteem, all of that around this idea that somehow um, I'm flawed, and trauma, abuse, just even hard things that happen in our lives can really create that narrative. And you had something in there about in your site about not being broken, and it just really made me pause because I thought, I've been married a very long time, and like you, I think I'm married to a man who definitely wants to provide me with the emotional support and connection that I'm asking for, but at times feels completely confused and bewildered as to how to do it. And then the next step ends up feeling that somehow he just can't, and he's maybe if it's not as strong as broken, but just a sense of I'm I don't know how to do this. I can't do this. And so I love this your program for that also, because do you often when you begin working with somebody before they really have that awareness, or even if they have the awareness but not the knowledge yet how to move forward, do you encounter that a lot where men feel as if they're just innately or maybe broken and not capable?
Yes. A few years ago, we had a gentleman that Jim Castain's his name, that owned a fairly significant marketing company, and his specialty for his company was doing extensive studies, surveys on customers for large companies. And he'd do these surveys and interview the people and really find out what the customers were really wanting, and often what the company wasn't delivering. So he volunteered to do that kind of study on our men, and he came back with a very impressive study. And the takeaway was men do not feel they're enough.
Mm.
And I just, like, when I heard that, I just get the chills from my body because I knew it was true. And now Jim was so blown away with that study and talking to our men and learning about what we were doing. He's done our training. He's now finishing up a much bigger study that's going to become a book. And then he's thinking about another book. I mean, he's just like dove into this whole thing about men because he sees that, we don't think we're good enough. And there's a lot of misconceptions and sort of what you're talking about, Bonnie, that you guys feel trapped. And one of the things is we're all in silos. We don't talk to each other about this stuff, unlike women. And so one of the first things that happened when we put guys together is I thought I was the only one.
Mm.
And so to get back to your question, yeah, I think a lot of it is performance. I don't know your husband, but knowing me and knowing other men, it's like we want to do a good job. Men don't take things on like a relationship unless they think they can win at it. But we get into it and we realize that we're in over our head. And then we sort of panic because we don't have, like, we're trying to build a house. We don't have a set of plans. I've never really done this, and I don't have all the tools I need.
Mm.
And so we run around fixing things, but never really renovating or building that house. And we feel the stress. We feel the stress from our partners, and we feel the stress of the relationship itself. And this is, the work I've done with couples. And the poor guy just feels really stuck with that, and he's going around in circles.
Yeah, and I would think, in therapy, when someone feels that they're failing, it's very difficult. They can be very aware. They can know kind of what's wrong, but then they also feel like they're failing, and there's the stuck. It's like, where do we move from here? So can you talk a little bit? I don't want you to give away any trade secrets or anything, but what is it actually? What actually happens with these men? Do you suppose when they find that they have, it's sort of like they've come through the side window into their emotions because they're coming through their body. What do you suppose is, I suppose you've been told by these men, what are they experiencing? How are they explaining to you what's happening to them?
Yeah, I'll give you away all my secrets if I don't think they're secrets. I want to see guys and other people that are helping guys, succeed. I think the first thing that happens is once you take it out of the emotional arena, and this is what I realized many years ago when I was rolfing guys, because I'd start out asking them an emotional question, I'd run into a wall. I'd ask the same question, but rather than put it in an emotional context, I put it in a stress context. And then often I got so, because I knew the physiology of stress, and I would maybe explain a little science or physiology to sort of distract them, and maybe at least give their mind a frame that would allow for some emotional experience. And then I'd ask them, what's their sensation? What were they feeling in their body? What are they feeling here in their body? And after they got that report, not just with me, but with their own body, if often they'd start just naturally sharing about what they're feeling emotionally, or inevitably, if I do ask them an emotional question at that point, it's easier to answer it. One, because they have this sort of yes rapport going with me. They trust me. They trust themselves. They see that whatever they say, I'm going to accept. And now they're probably aware of it, and they're thinking less. And so this is the other thing. We ask guys questions, and automatically we think about them. And my partner is a couples therapist, and we do couples trainings and retreats. And what I love, a lot of things I love about it. One of the things I love about them is, we break the couples off, and they do this little exercises by themselves. And we go around, and I'll sit next to them, and I'll go, "How's it going?" And inevitably, I get something like, "Yeah, we're back in our cycle. It's not going too well." And I would go, "Great." And I go, "Great? Well, I'm here to help you." And so I have him talk a little, and inevitably what would be happening is the guy would be doing what he always does. He tries to speak to his partner in an emotional way. And then I nicely sort of laugh, and you're doing what I've always done, and we all do as guys. You think you're being emotional. You're using emotional words. But really what you're doing, you're judging, you're evaluating, you're fixing, you're giving, solutions, suggestions, the litany of things. But you're really not connecting emotionally. And that starts with because you're not connecting to yourself emotionally, because you're thinking. And you're thinking because you're trying to perform because you want to get it right. Mm-hmm. And you know all the things you shouldn't do. So you're evaluating, you're thinking, and you may be in a bit of a freeze response or disassociated state, which furthers the disconnection from your body and your emotions. So you're doomed. And you're picking up non-verbally, all her physiology, because you know it, that she's not getting it. And so your stress is going up, which only enhances your disassociation, your survival responses. And you try even harder, and she, the cycle, and they go, yeah. And then I go, "Okay, Joe, can I just sort of give you a demonstration and model this for you?" And of course, he and she says, yes. So for about 2 minutes, I channel Joe, but I channel him in an emotional way. And inevitably, she starts to cry because she knew he felt that, but she didn't feel it. She's feeling it from me. Mm-hmm. And, I've only known Joe for maybe half a day, just a little in relationship to other guys, but I knew him enough, and I know men enough to be able to sort of channel him. And he's just like, his jaw's dropping because it's like, yeah, that's what I feel. Yeah, that's what I feel. And he's seeing that she's responding to it. And it's like, part of him's going, "You mean it's that easy?" Mm-hmm. And then I go, "Okay, I want you to do what I just did." And he does. And of course, he's not doing it like me because he's never done it, but he's doing it. And I'm reinforcing it, and she's reinforcing it. And then I just have him practice it. But, where I'm focusing for him is on what he's feeling in his body. Because what I tell guys is if you try to feel it emotionally, most of the time you're going to think it, because that's the neural pathway. That's what you're conditioned to do. And in some ways, that's what you were trained to do. And so just put that in the back seat. Feel your body first. So she's sitting there. What do you feel? And if it's uncomfortable, that's fine. Feel that. And then, maybe it's a few seconds or whatever, do your little somatic meditation. Just feel it, accept it. And from that experience of feeling it, then say something from the experience. And it might be, I feel stressed, or I feel scared, or I feel whatever, but say something that's authentic. And even if you don't, I'd say to guys, even if you don't say it right or perfect, more often than not, she's going to respond in a positive way. And that might be that she just doesn't react negatively, but she's going to feel your authenticity. Even though your words might not be all that articulate, she's going to feel that you're trying to feel. And that's going to downregulate her. And you're going to pick that up, and you're going to relax a little. And then you're going to maybe say something a little more vulnerable. And over a course of time of several conversations like that, you're going to feel safer. You're going to get better at it. She's going to start to see that you're really working at this, and there's some traction and some hope, and you'll start to create a positive cycle.
Yeah, I can really see that. And I was actually thinking when you were talking that um that whole thinking versus feeling is something that I encounter in therapy with clients all the time. Females also, because it's the safe place to go, right? It's yeah, let me think about this. And the minute you do that, you're shutting off any connection to how it's feeling. You mentioned these couples, working with couples, which I think is fantastic. Um, I'd like to hear more about sort of what's coming up for that, and then also I'd like you to talk about because you do groups with men, not just couples, right?
Yeah, so I started out, as I mentioned, with men's groups, and we still do men's groups in different ways. And we got virtual groups, we got ongoing virtual groups, ongoing live groups. We do what we call drop-in groups, where guys just drop in for an hour, no ongoing commitment. We do different kinds of trainings, virtual trainings, live trainings that involve small groups. Could be as small as a triad to bigger groups. So one of the secrets of what we do is it's all sort of peer to peer. In other words, we use other men to train men.
Mm,
And so what happens is, and I saw this in my groups, particularly when I redesigned the model and started having my own groups that were based on that model, is that guys don't need to know this stuff. All they need to do is, one, feel safe, has some set of agreements or protocols, like confidentiality being the biggest. And it helps if they have a little guidance with someone that's a little more experienced. But I've seen it not happen with that, with just our set of protocols. They get in there and they mess it up, but they're messing it up as guys and they're learning. So guys get sad, they get upset, and they're being real. And like I say to these guys, you don't sleep with them and you don't work with these guys. So the only real relationship is this group. So there's no really secondary consequences. They can be more authentic. They got these guys like to know the rules of engagement, like with sports, war, or whatever. And most guys will play within those rules. So once they know the rules, they see everyone else is playing in the rules, and they got some rapport, they start to really open up. And we've got guys. I remember one guy several years ago in my group. We do like a check-in. Everyone goes around and just checks in for a few minutes, or maybe sometimes the first round is like maybe 30 seconds. And the new guy was the last guy. He was his attorney, and he was just blown away. He said, "I never known. I've never seen this. I could never imagine this was possible." And immediately he started speaking. He started crying
mm,
because, one, he knew it was safe. Two, he knew that emotions were not shamed, or actually honored. Three, he saw models of how to do that from these other guys, and he was inspired by them. And so that's the real power of these kinds of groups or trainings where there are other men there. And we do these trainings where there's always a few guys that pick the seat next to the door, and they'll admit later that they picked that seat because they didn't know if they wanted to stay.
mm-hmm.
I remember a while ago we had this big tough guy, and his first thing he says when we did the check-in is, "I don't like guys, I don't like men, and don't touch me." And at the end, he was hugging everyone and saying, "I love you. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you." Now, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. But we all sort of knew he was a teddy bear on the inside.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I find with most guys is they're so hungry for an environment where they can feel, express, get connected in these really authentic ways to other men. And so guys come to us because they usually have some kind of problem. It's not a real serious problem like addiction or whatever, but usually it's a relational, and it's they're not getting traction. So they go, "I'll give this a try." And it varies, but we'll say within 6 months, they're usually on the other side of it, but they stay. They
Mm,
stay in the group, they stay in the community because they want more, but they also want this connection they can't get in any other place.
yeah. The connection, that whole idea about being relational and connecting. I love the thought that, this group gives people the opportunity, like you were talking about the modeling of it, which is so powerful, I would assume, for that guy sitting by the door, because he doesn't know. I'm sure his fight or flight is, firing up big time. I'm going to just duck out the minute I can, because it probably feels quite terrifying. I would assume, what is going to happen in here? You know, don't touch me. Like, this whole idea of I'm not going anywhere near that, because it's scary, and I feel like I'm broken, or I feel like I don't know how to do that. So I love the idea that men are modeling it for men. I think you're really onto something, and it really is exciting for me. I think I I'm just really happy to hear about something like this going on, because I think it's badly needed in the world, because of just the sort of unfortunate stereotypes that we have, and the misunderstandings around what we're supposed to be like and what we're supposed to not be like, as far as feeling our emotions and connecting to others. Anything else that you'd like to share about resources or places for people to go to hear more about you?
Yeah, I mean, Bonnie, you just sort of brought up something that which sort of answers that question, is that we're getting more and more referrals from therapists because these guys are coming in and they're like our best guys because one, they're committed. They're already put, skin in the game in terms of time and money in the therapy, but they need a place to practice.
Hmm.
And like you said, that you get to practice with these other guys. So the guys are, and the therapists are seeing that, and particularly the couples therapists, because they see, and again, I'm a guy, so I can say this is true. Often the guy in the relationship is the one behind the emotional learning curve or whatever. So, they get a place to practice what they're learning in therapy and then maybe learning with us. And they blossom not only with us, but, in their relationship. So, one of the things that we want to be more and more for therapists is a resource for, like a practice arena for therapists or for their clients or male clients.
Hmm.
And yeah, in terms of the couples work, Dahlia, who's my partner, who's the EFT couples therapist, we do these, local, generally local, sometimes in or outside the country, but usually here in Northern California, a few times a year, these Hold Me Tight couples trainings. And Hold Me Tight's what Sue Johnson developed, the founder of emotional focused therapy. And we're doing a retreat down in Imaloa, down in Costa Rica for couples for a week. And then in terms of the trainings for men, just men can check me out at owenmarcus.com, and I'd be glad to talk to anyone in terms of the training, the coaching, and anything we do. And I'd just like to leave guys with what you said, that you're not bad, you're not broken. It's just either the trauma you've had, major or minor, or the training that you've had on how to be a man,
Yeah.
that it's become systemic, and it's almost as if it's genetic, but it's not. I mean, it's like I tell these guys, you learn to survive, you learn to be a man in this culture around that model, and it's seen its usefulness. And it's not that there's something wrong with you. You just learned the wrong sport for the wrong game.
Mhm.
And, you just need to learn these new skills and have a place to practice them.
Yeah. Yeah. The number one thing I hear from people when the change is, we're talking about the change, and they say, I don't think I'm wired that way, Bonnie. And it always makes me smile, because I know it feels that way, right? I'm sure you encounter that all the time. They feel like they're hardwired this way because they've lived their whole lives being taught this. I mean, it's subliminal and not so subliminal. You watch TV commercials, in songs, in just everywhere in our environment. So you can you can understand why it feels like it's just my personality, but I love that you're giving them the option and the chance to play with it in a way so they can begin to see that it's not only good for relationships, but it's good for them. I
Oh
can only
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. We
yeah.
get, a lot of guys that come in because of relationship problems, but a year later, they're changing careers. Like this attorney became a therapist
Mm,
because of this work, and he loves his work. He hated being an attorney. Um, so it changes their lives sometimes, and everyone benefits, and certainly them. And one of the things that we've gotten good at doing is explaining the physiology of stress, which explains the emotional affect of it, and the impact of culture. So for guys particularly, when their box of understanding expands, it creates more space, more space for their relationship and for their own experience. Because part of what I've saw with men is that our belief systems or model of what it is to be a man is so small that until you give them solid explanations on something bigger or something possible backed by science, it's hard for them to, as you said, to believe they're not hardwired or whatever, that they could change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Incredible. I could really listen to you talk all day. I love this. I really do. I find it so hopeful and so encouraging. So I'll make sure everything's in the show notes. I'll review with you before this show goes out to make sure any resources you spoke about as far as people that you've trained under and any books or anything like that. Anything there that you want to make sure to mention? Any resources?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of books I've used. I mean, lately I've been reading all of Stephen Porges's books, and he's the guy that developed polyvagal theory, and everything he talks about is what we do. Uh, it's sort of coincidence, and he's one of the people that we're going to have on our program, along with Peter Levine, one of my first teachers. But Stephen Porges really understands the importance of safety, number one,
Mm,
and how the physiology either takes us out of connection or deepens connection. And again, guys don't need to go all down the rabbit hole in that, but when they can understand, and this is something that Stephen trains a lot of therapists, will teach the therapist right from the start, is to tell your clients it's the trauma. So when they froze, when they did not take action, they took action and they survived, and that was a good thing. So their
mhm,
disassociation, their being weak or not taking action was a physiological response, and you don't need to be shamed about it. And that's a big thing for men, because shame runs rampant for men, and that's a different kind of freeze, but it sort of freezes them when they understand that, in the ways that they don't perform or perform well is really not an emotional thing, it's a physiological thing. It just downregulates their
mm.
judgment and their fear and everything else.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, okay, I can get that.
Yeah. Stop that pathway to somehow that they're wrong or that they're broken.
Right.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Well, like I said, I'm going to make sure everything's in the show notes because you've given so many rich resources and just rich information. And I have other questions. In the interest of time, maybe I'll have you on again at
Yeah,
some
have me
point.
on again down the road. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
And your husband's welcome to come to one of our trainings or talk to me or whatever. But yeah, we get a lot of guys of therapists, and we get therapists too, that come to us because they know this stuff, but they don't have an environment like this.
right. Exactly. Exactly. That's what makes it so unique and full of possibility, I think, for uh, people who maybe in the past, men primarily, who just didn't find that therapy was working for them, or if they worked with something around therapy, but still finding they've got that extra place to go that they can't seem to figure out how to do. So,
And one of the things that happens is guys do this work. Maybe they haven't done any therapy, and then they go do therapy. Particularly, guys will often go and bring their partners into couple therapy, because it's not unusual for the guy to be behind the curve. 6 months later, he's pushing his partner,
mm,
and she's going, "Oh, what's happening here?
yeah,
I don't know if I like this. All right, I guess I like it." So then they're going into couples therapy.
yeah, incredible,
Yeah, and
incredible.
so I think there's a great relationship between what we do, which is certainly not therapy, it might be therapeutic, and therapy, and I think there's a very synergistic
I
relationship
agree.
there that a lot of guys are finding.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that from you, and I don't feel it any sort of adversarial, this is right or wrong. It just feels like it's a fantastic resource and a fantastic, as I said, maybe it's, sometimes you can't go in straight for the front door, and it's a window that's allows people to start thinking about things in a different way. Thank you, Owen, so much. This time has absolutely flown by. And I like after you and I will make sure I've got all the resources in the show notes. But thanks again for joining me today.
All right, Bonnie, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.